Every character, location, or experience you've read about in my crime fiction novels holds a piece of reality. I'm Helen Taylor. Welcome to the story behind my stories, the video podcast where crime fiction meets my authentic experience. Here, we delve into the real-life inspirations and intimate stories that shaped my novels. Discover how my everyday encounters, adventures, and travels translate into tales as gripping as they are genuine. The story behind my stories goes behind the words on the page to reveal the backstory that inspires my writing. Hit follow or subscribe and ensure you're part of this journey. Hi, so I thought I'd do the next episode out on my morning walks. If you follow me at all, listen to on social media, then you will have seen that I do get a lot of my writing process done out on Rupert's walks. And whilst I didn't have Rupert, nor did I I had to worry about the weather when I wrote tie-dye. It does add to my creative process to have physical activity and move about, and that's what I did when I was in Thailand writing tie-dye. So we left it last week that I just arrived. After a few weeks and writing the plot line and the timeline and defining the key characters for tie-dye, I then got into a routine of writing, which was to get up every morning at 7 a.m. But that's when I had the time to myself without disruption or distraction. As I've explained, it was a backpacker place and they all tended to be out partying at night, so I had plenty of space and time at that time in the morning. So Dewey would be there in the restaurant. I'd pop over, grab a can of Diet Coke, which I know is not the best for health and well-being, and especially not first thing, but that was what I did back then. So to go back to my hammock, and I'll see if I can sort out a picture. But the hammock was on the balcony of my bungalow, and so I could put my laptop, my can of Coke and everything on that balcony while I was in the hammock. Sorry, moving over to this side so that the sun doesn't blind you. So then in the hammock, I'd get in my hammock and I'd have my laptop on my lap and I would write for 3 hours. Now, I'm not saying I wrote solidly for 3 hours. I could get stuck on bits and I'd be thinking them over, but I did write for 3 hours. And then I would head over to the restaurant, have some breakfast, which for me was usually noodle soup. And then I would walk along the beach or along the road into Tong Salar. And that was my walk. I would walk. That would mull things over, that would extend the plot line, it would give me ideas, because my head was in that space, thinking about what I'd written that morning, and so what I was going to be writing the next day. It was just a really good way of grounding back into my body and being able to give the space and sit with where I was in the story at the time. So I did that day in, day out. Now, one thing that I learnt from tie-dye, which I have not carried over, is that rewriting, editing, sometimes a page, sometimes a chapter, sometimes a paragraph to get it absolutely perfect. And then I might go back to it later and decide that wasn't even what I wanted to say. I end up removing it, end up completely changing it, all sorts. So I don't do that anymore. I now have a rule that I write it all down. I do not read any of it until I'm finished. Then I just leave it. And I did do that in Thailand. Once I'd got past maybe the 4th or 5th chapter, I was in and wrote. And then there would be things, this is the story behind my stories, so there would be things that happened that I would think, oh yeah, that would be really good in the book. So I would then incorporate them, or at least make notes so that they were ready to incorporate at the time. The big one that comes to mind for me is the jungle piece. Moog took me to the land that we were going to use for the stables, and we were having that cleared. So we talked about the design and all of that stuff, had that all in process. But the thing is, I knew horses, I knew stable management, I knew business management. None of that was scary or going to be a problem for me. It was, where do I take them on this pony trekking? And so one day, Moog and Liam told me they were going to take me into the jungle. Now this was going to be a bit of a novelty for me, because I'd only seen Moog sat at a table in front of the TV in Charm restaurant, eating and drinking with his friends. But we headed off to the jungle, and I don't even remember now where we started the trek or where we finished it, to be honest. But we were on foot, obviously, not on horses. But it was a fascinating experience for me, that I had never had anything like that before. And Liam had his gun, and he was on the lookout for anything that he could shoot and take back to eat, which I wasn't that sure on. watching him climb up to the top of the orchid trees. I don't know whether the orchids grew at the top of the trees there, or whether that was just their landing place and where they were to enjoy the sun, because obviously in the jungle it's dark and dingy. But Liam could just shimmy up those trees so quick, and he did so once to check we were going the right way, which again was another concern. Moog was all about picking all sorts of things. He had a little pouch with him and he would pick up all sorts of things. Now Moog's English wasn't great, so Liam translated a lot, but it was, this leaf is good for this, that leaf is good for that. Morning! It's one of my dog walking friends. Insects, nuts, flowers. Put them all in his pouch, and he did take them back, and they were there on the plates with his friends for dinner that night. A leaf thing that I saw all over Thailand, a lot of Thais picking, that they seem to use a bit like we would use cabbage, and that was how they used the jungle for food and all these different plants. Now, and I remember that really vividly, and I tried some of the things, but as the extract in the book, which I will add into this video for you, as that describes the insects, the heat, the trickling of sweat down your back. It's not that warm here today, but I still vividly remember that, just the biting insects, the stifling heat, the dampness in there. But that was one of the things. There was a whole load of other experiences throughout my year in Thailand, that I would love to have used for the book, but weren't necessarily appropriate. One being Songkran, which is the whole island shuts and has water fights. So you drive around in the truck with barrels of water in the back, and you chuck it over people, and people come out of their houses with hose pipes, and maybe not so environmentally friendly now, although all the water came from the rain. But that was a really cool, exciting time. But I'm going to find that piece, that jungle piece in Thai, and read that to you in this episode, as that really describes how I felt for the jungle part in the book, which hopefully won't give too much away of the plot, so that you can read it. And hi, back inside now. This is the extract that I was talking about. Some of the bushes and trees that overhung the bath caught the top of his head, making him start and duck away as if he'd been escaping a poisonous snake clinging to the trees. As he was a good foot taller than anyone else here, he caught these odd branches all the way along, and every time he ducked and felt an adrenaline kick, as if his fight or flight mechanism took over any rationalisation his mind could make. From a distance, Goodwin also looked as though he was doing some weird macabre dance, twitching around, swiping the back of his calves, arms, thighs, knees, in some order unbeknown to Goodwin, which made the dance all the more spasmodic and jerky as he whipped around at unseen enemies. His legs were covered in swollen red bumps, concentrated on the backs of his knees, from mosquitoes or other biting insects. When he caught one in the act, the size of the creature was disproportionate to the discomfort caused. For Goodwin felt he could feel the teeth of his enemy. It was like two pinpricks that felt a good centimetre apart. That wasn't what put him off concentrating on his task ahead. It was the itching, a weapon so powerful that he couldn't ignore it. He had to scratch. This one, that one, the one on his arm, now his left calf, oh the right thigh, right ankle, left knee, ow, left elbow, right inside calf. How had they all got him so fast? How had they snuck in and bitten him so many times without him being aware at all? And it was the middle of the afternoon, not dawn or dusk. So he walked on, dodging the overhanging trees for snakes and dancing the macabre jig of scratch the bites. The terrain had subtly changed as he descended higher, no longer resembling a wood at home. It now looked like a jungle. It was dark in here, the height of the trees shutting out the vague light from the cloud-blotted sun. The ground was wetter, more soil than sand-based. The leaves of the lower plants sprayed cold water across Goodwin's red-spotted legs, cooling the burning itch of his numerous bites. He wished he'd thought this through before he came. He would have bought insect repellent as well as worn trousers. His dance of the scratch the bites added to the sweat he was producing, just from being there. Every inch of his clothing stuck to him. Sweat trickled into places he couldn't imagine could sweat, causing the dance to take on a new form. His sweat seemed colder than his skin, hence the sensation made him think he was being bitten again. Sweat dripped into his eyes as the sleeves of his t-shirt were no help anymore. He could wring liquid out of them. His hazy view now made watching where he put his feet more difficult, but he had to keep looking as he placed each step. He didn't know what insects, reptiles, or animals he would find, and so he scanned for anything that moved, his head nodding up and down as he observed the trees above and the ground below. How he regretted his decision to come alone. This was a scary place. So I didn't find it as scary as Goodwin did, because I wasn't alone. I was with two guys who could tell me what was going on, and but this is where I take my own experience and heighten it in different ways, or imagine it in a different scenario, so that I can make it more to fit with the needs of the book. But as you can tell, I don't feel, oh my god, jungle, I'm never going in there again. I really enjoyed the walk and what I learnt and everything, but that whole itching and biting and the sweat feeling I've taken, and I've just looked at the environment in a different, with a slightly different take on it, looked at it in a slightly different way in order to make that environment seem and feel a lot more sinister. To know why he was in the jungle, because he wasn't setting up a pony checking business, you will need to read the book. So that was, I wanted to show you that, and in the comparison of where I was walking earlier in the video, in my woods back here, as in the book, it resembled that in the lower levels, but as you climbed into the jungle, the terrain and the atmosphere and the feel did change with the heat. Then next time I will go through what happened then with the pony trekking into the jungle and the rest of my time that year in Thailand. See you next week.